All right, students, welcome back. Today we're talking about Chapter 5, E-commerce Security and Payment Systems. Probably going to be a little longer video. I'm going to go off on tangents for some of these. Internet security security in general is part of my day job. So I am going to dive a little deeper into some of these topics. And we're going to not only try to relate it to, obviously, the class, but also things that you can do in your daily lives to increase your internet security. The term MAD, M-A-D, mutually assured destruction, really came to be popular during the Cold War. And the idea was that the United States and the Soviet Union had individually enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world that if there was any nuclear attack by one nation, the other nation can be assured that they would be destroyed in the process. When we talk about cyber war, mutually assured destruction, it's a little different. We're not necessarily talking about destruction of physical property, but we're talking about destruction of intellectual property, but it also can be physical, and we'll talk about that in a second. We want to talk about two different types of targets for cyber war: soft targets and hard targets. Hard targets could be governments. They could be infrastructure. Think of power networks, hydro networks. Soft targets can be civilian industry, a company, Apple, for example. It could be the power grid. Soft targets such as the power grid can be an annoyance if they're attacked. We might lose power. We could lose power for a very long time, but that could lead to destruction of physical property. Hard targets would be more detrimental to society if there was a large cyber attack on a government organization or a military installation. Cyber attacks are different though, because a lot of times it's not clear on who your adversary is. If you think about how the internet works or how information can travel across the internet, you can purposely divert your actions through other countries' networks. So even though a cyber attack may originate in Russia or China, for example, those bad actors can make it look like that the United States was attacked through another country. Or if you trace the attack back, it might go through dozens countries before you find its origin. A lot of these individuals are incredibly good at hiding their tracks. That's kind of, one of the calling cards of being a good hacker or a good malicious individual. You want to know how to hide your cyber footsteps. There's a lot of things nations and corporations can do to secure themselves against cyber attack, but one thing we're going to find out is it's extremely difficult to be 100% safe. We'll talk about this later on, but there's a real balance between being cyber secure and user friendly. The more secure you are, the less friendly it is for your good employees to use the system. But if we make systems incredibly easy to use, a lot of times they're incredibly easy to hack. On average, globally, cybercrime costs, according to this slide, anywhere between $455 to $600 billion, and that just rises. That cost keeps getting higher and higher. Cybercrime is incredibly expensive. For example, if there was a intrusion into a government network, and let's just say one computer was compromised, that could cost anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 just to clean up that system and to investigate it. And chances are some of that system might have to be destroyed. In the civilian sector, depending on what you're working on, you can look at similar prices. Anytime a system is compromised or a network is compromised, typically that network needs to be shut off. We need to isolate that network so we can figure out who got in and what did they have access to. This is an incredibly slow process. So the longer that network is offline, you could be losing revenue, or at the very least being a little unproductive, and that costs money. If any systems were damaged, we're going to have to replace those damages. And of course, upgrades are going to have to be done to the system to prevent this from happening in the future. How do we have good security? Some of this is common sense. We want to have new technology. You don't want to be running Windows 7. You want to have antivirus, anti-malware, and of course, upgrading those. If you don't have an antivirus or an anti-malware on your system, I highly recommend it. Anytime you go on the internet without these tools, you're really risking something happening. You also might want to look into using a VPN, a virtual private network. Some of these are free, some of them are incredibly low cost, but it's a way to help hide your tracks on the internet. And this isn't a way to be malicious. Not saying that you're doing anything you might want to hide from, but it creates a more difficult environment for your data to be intercepted, and it makes just a better experience for you and gives you some confidence that what you're doing on the internet is secure. Depending on what your company is or what you do, you might have guidance and policy in place on cybersecurity, keeping your system secure, and just in general good operating habits. Maybe they want you to change your password every 30 days. Maybe you're using some form of two-factor authentication when you log into your system. And two-factor authentication really takes into account something that's your password, and some physical thing that you have to interact with. Think of if you sign into eBay or other sites, like your bank, for example, you might log in like normal with a username and password, but then they might say, let's text your device. So they'll send a text to your phone with another code. That's an example of two-factor authentication, because you know your password. But to access your account, I need your password, and I also need your phone or a device that message is getting sent to, and that code they send you. So there's multiple layers. A thing that we see common in different industries is something called a YubiKey. YubiKeys are produced, they look very similar to a USB thumb drive. They plug into your USB slot, and you press a little button, and it does two-factor authentication in a hexadecimal code that does a handshake with a server. So in that case, to get into my work computer, I need to know my username and password, but I also have to have physical access to this YubiKey, and I have to touch the button for the key to regurgitate its code. That code is then sent off to our corporate server where it does a handshake. So you see there's multiple levels of security before you can get into my work account. But these cost money. It costs money to buy YubiKeys, to have the infrastructure to run them. And like we talked earlier, there's a trade-off. The more secure, the more factors we put into logging into a system, the slower it is for employees to get in, the harder it is to get in. If I'm having you change your password every 10 days, or maybe have to authenticate yourself every time you open a program or download a file, we're really bogging down the work environment. Yes, we're being incredibly secure, and I know that my system is safe, but we're slowing everybody down, and we're making it cumbersome for employees to go and do their day-to-day job. Our text points out 3 vulnerabilities in an e-commerce environment, and I'll throw a 4th one in here that we won't be quizzed on, but it'll be something for you to think about. Obviously, we can attack your individual machine. We can attack that client computer. If we gain access to it, we'll have everything on that machine. We may or may not have access to the servers that machine goes through. And that's why in a corporate world, or anytime you're on a network, we really encourage you not to save files locally. Don't save them to the hard drive in your machine. Save them to the network. The network is typically more secure than your machine, especially if you're a mobile worker or maybe work from home. Anything can happen to your device, to that client device, but we know that the server will be secure. Second point is the server itself. If you have access to the server, we have access to probably over 98% of files of that individual or that company. We have access to payroll. We have access to customer files and all the customer credit card and billing information. We may also have access to some of the machines that access that server. That's not a guarantee, but you may be able to get access to the machines. We can also have access to the communication pipeline between the client and the server, different channels of communications. Maybe we can get into that company's VPN, and then we can pick and choose what we want to have access to. The fourth one I'll throw out really isn't control of a company, but more and more we see organizations outsource their IT, outsource their servers to a cloud infrastructure. We see a lot of malicious attacks on cloud computing server farms. Because if you can get into that server farm, you're not getting into one company, you're getting into dozens and maybe hundreds of different companies if you can access the IT support system. So it's important that if you're ever in a decision to outsource your IT, we really want to make sure that that company has robust security in place, because not only could a malicious actor get access to your company, but they'll get access to any other company that that company supports. You might have ran into some of these before in your day-to-day life on the internet. Browser parasites, adware, spyware. Adware, we used to call this pop-ups. In the early days of the internet, back when I had my dial-up modem, you'd get pop-ups all the time. That was just part of life on the internet. Now we see that different adware. And these are programs that are advertising to us. Some of them I hesitate to say are legitimate, but there are legitimate uses for this. But adware collects a lot of data and it exploits a lot of data. They know your habits online. That's why we cater advertisements to you. But it also can be used maliciously. Same thing with spyware. I want you to pay attention to tracking user keystrokes down there. One thing that people don't understand is spyware doesn't necessarily watch where you go on the internet. It does, don't get me wrong. But the important thing is what you type on the internet or where your cursor is. I want to know what you're clicking on, where you're going, and what you're typing. If I know what you're typing, then I know your password. I know your username and password. If you type in a URL, maybe you're going to your bank or maybe you're going to Gmail. Well, the next thing you're probably going to type is your username. And after that, you're going to type your password. Well, now I have access to your account. Some unwanted programs are just an annoyance. They might change the homepage of your browser. They might change some settings. Some of them can be incredibly malicious and incredibly intrusive, where they're collecting your personal data, selling that to companies, putting it up on the dark web to sell to other individuals. And this is why I really stress, if you are not using an antivirus, anti-malware, or even a VPN, really should be looking into some of the free solutions out there. If you want or you're incredibly concerned, it might be worth purchasing some of these for your own protection. How many of you have received an email that was from an email address you know? Maybe it was a friend, a relative, or a coworker. And the subject could be something, I need a favor. And when you read the email, you might get something like, oh, I need some gift cards, or I'm stranded somewhere, I need you to wire some money for me, or just send me some gift cards. This is phishing, and the textbook definition, any deceptive online attempt by a third party to obtain confidential information for financial gain. This could be somebody trying to portray your bank, where you would get an email that looks like it came from your bank, or any other financial service you use online, PayPal, maybe Macy's if you purchase through them and save your credit card information. And the email would go something like, hey, we need you to confirm your checkout information, confirm your credit card, confirm your username and password. And what they want you to do is to click on the link in the email, which is going to take you to a close proximity of the actual website. It's going to look like your bank's website, but there's going to be little things in there that are slightly off. And they'll ask you to put in your username and password, maybe your bank routing number, maybe your credit card number and the 3-digit code on the back. This is how individuals get personal banking information. And a lot of you might be shaking your head thinking, oh, I would never fall for that. Well, they're not counting on people like you to give them that information. Typically, when they send out these phishing emails, they've bought a list on the dark web of thousands of emails, and they send this email out to everybody across the board. There's usually some common thread between those. They might have bought a list of, hey, these are all the email addresses located with First Summit Bank, or these are email addresses that have PayPal accounts. Well, great. Now we know a common thread between everybody. So we can spoof a PayPal email saying, hey, I need you to confirm your login. We changed our security codes or something like that. And then they put it out to 1,000 people, and they're really banking on a small percentage to actually be fooled by it and go through. Because right away, you know that a lot of those emails are going to be caught by spam folders. Gmail's really good at filtering out spam, so vast majority of them are going to go straight to spam. Some of those emails might not be active anymore, so they really won't go anywhere. Some people will probably just delete them because they might say, I don't have PayPal anymore. I'm not with that bank, and they'll just delete them. Other people, hopefully like you, would look at that email and say, this is junk, and you delete it or you report it for spam. But a small percentage are going to look at that email and believe that it's true, and they're going to give all their username, password, and account information to this malicious individual. That's what they want. So, and again, this is something that we all can do. We can educate our families. We can educate our coworkers on threats like this. Your bank, different companies will never ask you to verify your payment information. They would never do that on email. And this is why, because it's too easy for bad actors to get that information. All right, so let's get into some terms here, because there's sometimes there's confusion between hackers and what hacking is. A hacker itself is anybody who wants to gain unauthorized access to a computer, to a network, or to a system. Crackers are the same thing, but typically they have a criminal intent. They want to do this for personal gain or malicious reasons. We have different levels of hackers, different types. We have our white hats who I'll use the term, they hack for good. They want to help companies find flaws in their security. And this is a job. A lot of corporations have what they call tiger teams. And these are hackers on the payroll who try to hack into their system, hack into the products they have to find the exploits and fix them before that product goes to market. A good friend of mine is a professional pen tester. He's a penetration hacker. Companies hire him on a contract to hack into their network to see how secure it is. And in exchange, he gives them a report. Hey, these are your vulnerabilities. This is how I got into your network. This is what you can do to fix it. He himself doesn't fix it. He just tells them what needs to be done, and it's up to that organization. Big money into this. If you have the skill set, this is where you can get money being on a tiger team or being a freelance pen tester. Black hat hackers, these are notoriously the bad guys. They want to break in the networks to steal financial information, just cause general commotion. Gray hats are kind of in the middle. They believe that they are pursuing a higher goal when they hack. Sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's for bad. Both black hats and gray hats usually pursue cyber vandalism if they're not out for financial gain. And this can just be being annoying, maybe disrupting a website, changing some of the content going around, or even destroying the website itself. You may or may not be familiar with, and again, depending on your age, early in Wikipedia's life, there was a cyber vandalism attack by a user who was called Willie on Wheels. And what Willie on Wheels would do is he would just go to Wikipedia sites and put a picture of an old-timey car, and that was his calling card. And he would just do annoying things, changing some of the links. It was destructive, sure. It was a little malicious. I like to think it was in good fun, but it was something that really destroyed the credibility of Wikipedia in the early days, because then it was incredibly easy for anybody to to change articles. We didn't have a lot of the review that we do today. However, Willie on Wheels exploited a lot of other weaknesses in Wikipedia. And some people say that he was probably more of a gray or a white hat because a lot of Wikipedia security and a lot of their proofreading and fact checking really got into its maturity after the Willie on Wheels attack. So for good or bad, Willie on Wheels changed Wikipedia and made it into a better source today. By no means, if you sourced Wikipedia in your final, I wouldn't be okay with that. But I would be okay if you used Wikipedia as a jumping off point. And if you scroll down to the bottom of almost every Wikipedia page, there are legitimate sources down there. So use Wikipedia to get your feet wet, go down to the bottom to do your serious research. Finally, we'll talk about hacktivism. And these are groups who hack for social causes, social justice, maybe even political gain. We really saw the rise of this in the early 90s with a group called Cult of the Dead Cow. We're not going to get too much into what Call of the Dead Cow did. That's more of a cyber ethics course. But look them up. Form your own opinion on where they stand. But we do see hacktivism today. A lot of it can be social. We see that most. That's what we see a lot in this country. But around the world, there is political hacktivism as well. And again, all of these can be countered with good network security and good online practices. So we just finished talking about malicious hackers, and one of the things that probably comes to your mind when we think about hackers or malicious groups online is credit card theft, identity theft. And I want you to look at that first sentence there, and we're not even talking about 1%, 0.9% online, traditional desktop, and 0.8% of mobile transactions can be susceptible to credit card theft. And that might not seem a lot because it's not even 1%, but in 2009 alone, every day globally across the internet, there was 1 billion credit card transactions. So 0.8% of 1 billion is still a huge number. And a lot of these groups, whether it's an individual or maybe a hacking team, they don't use the credit cards that they steal or the identities they steal. They put those in a database and they sell that database on the dark web for other people to use. And they're not going to use all of them. They're going to scrub through it, and they're going to find people with purchase histories or financial histories that they might not notice, little purchases here and there. Some people are sloppy with it and get caught. Some are better. But this is still a real life thing that happens on a day-to-day basis. And again, I'm going to push for that VPN and having good cybersecurity threats, because the safer you are online, the more you minimize this happening to yourself. So we're going to close this out with kind of an open discussion that I want you to think about. I mean, by no means, this is an incredibly long PowerPoint. I'm barely even halfway through, but we're already at 22 minutes. I don't want to have too long of videos, but really the whole point of Chapter 5 is we need to be incredibly conscious about our online presence, both personally and professionally. And e-commerce is no different. Anytime we have consumers' information, whether it be their mailing address, their checkout information, credit cards, banking information, we need to treat that with the utmost respect and the highest level of security. It's incredibly important that companies invest into their cybersecurity and they train their employees. And so a lot of that even goes into their employees' habits at home, making sure that an employee can't be blackmailed, making sure that their own data is safe. More and more we see large companies provide their employees with software, free antivirus, free anti-malware, or even VPN software to make sure that their employees are safe and protected online. So I want to leave with this discussion here. Do you think your smartphone is secure? And go through some of these points and think about your individual phone, whether you use an Apple or an Android phone. Like we said before, nothing is 100% secure. And the last thing I'll talk about is about a year or two ago, we had a security conference. And one of the individuals that was presenting it was, again, a professional pen tester. Her job was to exploit vulnerabilities in networks. And as she was walking around the room presenting to us, she was just going through her normal spiel of, making sure, you're safe online, you're using software and everything. And one thing she asked was, who uses a antivirus or anti-malware or even a VPN on their phone? And maybe one or two people raised their hand. And when she came back to the front of the room, she pulled a little device out of her pocket, and it was a cell phone sniffer. And as she was walking around the room, she was collecting information of everybody's cellular devices, any device that was on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or even cellular networks. And up on the screen, you would see different names. This is the device name. This is the cell phone number attached to it, or maybe the MAC address, depending on how it was connecting to a network. And if she wanted to, or she didn't, but she could have drilled down even more to see data that in that phone or device was transmitting. I'm not trying to scare people with this, but really the key takeaway is you're never 100% safe online. There's always an exploit. You need to be smart what you do with your devices. You need to be smart with the information you have. If I've said this so many times, but if you don't have any sort of security on your system, please do it. That should be your big takeaway from chapter 5. All right, so we're already over 26 minutes. I'm going to let you guys go. Please keep reading on. Keep doing the good work. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Or even if you just want to talk about cybersecurity and things that you can do to protect yourself online, I'm always available and I love talking about this. Thank you.